Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Live Ones College Football Preview. And today we're going to be talking about the latest Power 5 conference to have a major shakeup in its lineup, one that might genuinely threaten its continued existence. With USC and UCLA announcing that they're going to be leaving for the Big Ten in 2024, the conference loses $230 million in annual athletics revenue, making an already tenuous financial situation even worse. The conference was so harmed by its decision to cancel and then uncancel its football season in 2020 that it had to distribute far less money per school the past couple of years than the rest of the schools in the Power 5. On average, schools in the Pac-12 are receiving $36.3 million from the conference's revenue pool apiece, dead last among the Power 5. Compare that to the almost $60 million that the Big Ten is handing out to its schools. These deficits are no joke, particularly now in the name, image, and likeness era. Particularly, probably even more painful for the conference in terms of trying to negotiate media rights deals to make things a little better is that USC and UCLA take with them the footprint of the country's second largest media market. Couple all of that with the crushing amount of debt that all of California's colleges are under right now, and it's really not difficult to understand the school's decision to move. As far as football goes, losing them isn't quite the gut punch that losing Texas and Oklahoma is going to be for the Big 12. Neither school's been the standard bearer of the conference for a long time, and the conference, frankly, hasn't been extremely relevant on the national scene in a long time. The Trojans and Bruins will leave a big hole when they do exit in 2024, but in the present, they are among the teams that will try to break the conference's college football playoff drought. Washington was the last Pac-12 team to reach the playoff in 2016, and the conference's 4-8 record in New Year's Day 6 bowls is the worst among Power 5 conferences. But I do think this conference is going to get a jolt of life into them this year. They're long overdue for it. Let's take a deep dive. The Arizona Wildcats. Not quite in a class by themselves in terms of awfulness in the Power 5, but it really doesn't take long to call the roll. 1-11 last year, their lone win came against Cal in a game that was so unspeakably awful to watch, I could recommend it as a makeshift Ipecac. They were 124th nationally in scoring last year. They were 101st in points allowed. Worst, they were dead last, 130th in the nation in turnovers forced. This team had nothing worth mentioning in any aspect of football. And yet, second-year head coach Jedd Fisch recruited so fiercely and with such unexpected force that Arizona's class was ranked number 1 in the Pac-12 this year in 2022. He boasts a roster turnover of almost 60% this year, between recruiting and the transfer portal. And if there was anything Arizona needed, it was roster turnover because last year's class was just not getting it done. Washington State transfer Jaden DeLara comes in to be the new quarterback. He was the league's offensive freshman of the year last season. This kid is one of those small, elusive, lightning-quick QBs with a deceptively strong arm who specializes in making big plays out of broken plays. He alone is going to improve the Wildcats' fortunes. The strength of the entire Wildcats team is its secondary. Cornerbacks Christian Roland Wallace and Traydon Stukes and safeties Christian Young and Jackson Turner are an experienced veteran group that should give the secondary a little stability and at least be able to slow down some of these great Pac-12 quarterbacks. The schedule, unfortunately, is a meat grinder. They open at San Diego State, 12-2 a year ago, and they kicked Arizona's ass last year, 38-14 in Tucson. Arizona then plays host to Mike Leach and Mississippi State and follows that by meeting perennial FCS giant North Dakota State, and that's not a guaranteed win at all. This team could conceivably be 0-3 by the time they hit conference play. I think they have the talent to beat Colorado, and Wazoo is a toss-up. If they can handle North Dakota State, this could be a 3-9 team, which would be a big improvement over last year. Arizona State. The Sun Devils were a sneaky good team last year, but people really did expect Herm Edwards to have gotten over the 8-win hump by now, and things are not likely to get better with how many pieces this team lost in the offseason. Quarterback Jaden Daniels transferred to LSU. Leading rusher Rashad White is off to the NFL. Top receiver Ricky Pearsall is going to Florida. LV Bunkley Shelton is off to Oklahoma, and their best offensive lineman is lost to graduation. They are getting some help through the transfer portal in Florida quarterback Emory Jones and Wyoming transfer Xavier Valladay at running back. Valladay in particular was a big-time baller at Wyoming. Not the flashiest running back, but definitely consistent and reliable. He's one of those running backs that always gets you 5 yards a carry. He's had 3,200 yards and 19 touchdowns on his career. The Sun Devils' defense was outstanding, 22nd in the nation overall. They're led by linebacker Merlin Robertson and his 124 career tackles, 7 sacks, 15 and a half tackles for loss, 6 interceptions in 4 years. The pass defense picked off 16 passes. It was among the best in the Pac-12. These guys should be fine on defense. It's just a question of how well all the new offensive pieces can gel together with Jones under center. Schedule-wise, this team's out-of-conference Power 5 game is at Oklahoma State. That's going to be a defensive rock fight, but I think the Cowboys take that one. There's no Oregon to face. The Utah and UCLA games are at home. They should win one of those, and the game at USC on the road is probably a loss. I think this team might actually be able to manage 9 wins this year. It's just a question of getting that new offense cranking. Cal was not a fun team to watch on TV, not even in the slightest. A dreadful offense that was mostly run-based without a feature back, just, kind of spread it around among, rotated guys in and out to go for 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They had a milquetoast quarterback who never grew into the role in 4 years, and a stout defense that kept things close enough in most games where you couldn't just say, that game's over. What else is on? Jack Plummer is coming in as a senior transfer from Purdue. Really kind of a lateral move, if you ask me. Plummer's of that same vein, just find the closest opening target and don't make mistakes. Be a game manager, make handoffs. I'm sorry. The defense was stout, but just had kind of a terrible lack of being able to get off the field on third down. The result was that almost every single Cal game last year was 4 yards at a time, 5 yards at a time, grind fest with a lack of big plays on either team's part and very low scoring. I don't want to shortchange the defense because it's literally their job to slow the other team down. So I'm going to spotlight Jackson Searman, the transfer middle linebacker from Washington. He's coming off a 91 tackle season with 4 tackles for loss and 1 pick. This guy is perfect for the Cal system. He's going to bottle up absolutely any run play that comes anywhere near him. Schedule-wise, they get Arizona and Colorado and miss Utah and Arizona State. You really can't complain about that. 2 easy wins. Oregon and Washington are both home games. I still think they're going to lose both of them. Notre Dame on the road is a loss. At USC and closing out the season at home against UCLA are probably both losses. This team can make it back to 6-6 this year, but I think that's as good as they're going to be able to manage. Colorado, not the glory years for the Buffaloes, to be sure. They were 4-8 last year. It's not just that they went 4-8. It's just that most of their losses weren't even close. Their offense was pitiful, one of the absolute worst in the nation, not just the Power 5. The Buffaloes averaged 18 points a game in 2021. If it wasn't for their mid-tier defense, this is just as easily a 2-10 team last year. They were that bad. J.T. Shrout, the transfer from Tennessee, should be back this year and become at least something of a difference maker after missing last year due to injury. Look for senior running back Ramon Jefferson, the transfer from Sam Houston State, to rack up some numbers. He had over 1,900 yards in his 2 years there. He can definitely keep the chains moving when he needs to. What little star power there is on this team is all on the defensive side of the ball. Safety Isaiah Lewis is the veteran leader. He's going into his 5th season and his 3rd year as a starter. He led the team last year with 68 tackles to go along with 2 picks in his 2nd straight all-conference season. The front 4 is good and stout, with junior Jalen Sammy looking to have a breakout year and senior Terrence Lang notching 61 career tackles, 7.5 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, and 5 broken up passes in his 37 games as a starter. Schedule-wise, it's tough, like it always is for this team. Starting the year off at home against TCU, that's a toss-up. At Air Force and at Minnesota are probably losses. UCLA at home is a loss. At Arizona might not even be a sure thing. Honestly, there's just not a lot of winnable games against this schedule. They got no FCS cupcakes. Hell, Colorado is the cupcake game for a lot of these other teams. So assume all the toss-up games go their way. That's still a maximum of 4 wins. I think 3 is honestly more likely. The Oregon Ducks, 10-4 last year, but they had a big problem that they've had, honestly, going back to when Chip Kelly left for the Eagles. This team just keeps losing games. It shouldn't. I mean, with all the money and recruiting this school puts into its football team, there is no reason that they shouldn't dominate this conference every year and put the Pac-12 in contention for a playoff spot most years. There's no reason this school can't be the Ohio State or the Alabama of the Pac-12. Ever since 2015, Oregon has had 1 loss to a team that has finished with a losing record in every year but 2019. And even that Justin Herbert-led powerhouse loss because it just didn't show up at Arizona State until it was too late. Now Mario Cristobal is gone for Miami, and they turn the reins over to a completely new regime that's going to be focused on the one thing this team hasn't had in decades, which is a stout defense. Oh, and Bo Nix is coming in as a transfer quarterback. This year is going to be very interesting, to say the least. We all know what Bo Nix can do in the field. We saw it for years at Auburn. He has his critics, obviously, never lived up to his freshman season when he won that thriller of an Iron Bowl. Seemed to regress under Brian Harson's system and was basically run out of town. But he's a well-practiced veteran who has every tool he needs to take advantage of the embarrassment of riches the Ducks always have on offense. You've got a trio of great sophomore wide receivers in Troy Franklin, Sevin McGee, and Dante Thornton. They're all explosive downfield threats. On defense, it's all about the linebackers. If these guys can all stay healthy, the team's going to have teams are going to have real trouble in the mid-range against them. I'm going to spotlight sophomore Noah Sewell, a guy who's getting on NFL draft radars as we speak. Last year, he took his game to another level with 114 stops, 4 sacks, 8.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 5 broken up passes, and an interception in a first-team All-Pac-12 season. This guy hasn't even come close to his ceiling yet. He could definitely be the team's breakout star under the new regime. Looking at the schedule, oh man. How would you like to draw defending national champion Georgia as your first game? That's a loss. BYU is a game to circle. That's probably a win, but you just never know. You couldn't possibly ask for a better road schedule than Oregon has this year. At Wazoo, at Arizona, at Cal, at Colorado, at Oregon State. They don't play USC or Arizona State, and they get Utah at home. There's absolutely no reason this team can't go 10-2 and win the Pac-12. It all comes down to that Utah game, November 19th. Circle your calendars. That's likely to be appointment television. Oregon State did so much better than expected last year. They went 7-5. They beat the Huskies, took down Arizona State, and they beat the eventual Pac-12 champion Utah by 8 points. Now everyone's asking, just how good can this program be? You've got dual-threat quarterback Chance Nolan, who threw for 2,600 yards and 19 touchdowns and ran for 3 touchdowns on top of it. Superstar running back B.J. Baylor is trying to make it as a Green Bay Packer, but freshman Damian Martinez is expected to be the number 1 guy going into the season. The defense, admittedly, it was a struggle. It finished 9th overall in the Pac-12, didn't have a pass rush. The secondary had all kinds of struggles. It's going to be up to junior linebacker Omar Spates to be a veteran presence that can help everyone along. The longtime 6'1", 236-pound linebacker, and he's a great tackler on top of it, can work inside or outside. He has 225 tackles, 5 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, 6 broken up passes, and 2 fumble recoveries in his 3 seasons as a Beaver. He's a 3-time honorable mention All Pac-12. Looking at the schedule, Montana State, certainly not a pushover. They showed that when they beat Washington last year. Their other non-conference games are Boise State and Fresno State. Ouch. Washington State, Cal, and Colorado at home are probably wins. Stanford on the road is a 50-50. Unfortunately, I just don't think another 7-5 performance is in the cards. The schedule's just, too close. If they can get to 6-6 and go bowling again, it's going to be a moral victory. Stanford. Wow, this team shit the bed last year. 3-9. And everything looks so great to start. I mean, they beat number 14 USC on the road. They beat number 3 Oregon in a really well-coached game. And then just everything fell apart. 7 losses in a row to end the season. The team basically forgot how to play every aspect of the game of football. So what's going to happen this year? Well, as always, Stanford once again has a quarterback that looks like he was tailor-made for the NFL. Tanner McKee just had no pass blocking to speak of, helping him out. But he's 6'6" and 225 pounds with a cannon for an arm. He has every tool that you would want in a guy to run a pro-style offense. They've also got the receivers. Benjamin Urosek is back at tight end after averaging over 15 yards a catch. Elijah Higgins has a huge physical matchup problem. He's like Chase Claypool, honestly. And he led the team with 45 catches last year. But there's just no offensive line, and that's a big problem. On defense, the Cardinals couldn't force takeaways. They couldn't come up with sacks, and they were miserable against the run. They allowed 236 rushing yards a game. In the Pac-12, man, that has to be better. The seniors have to step up, and it starts with Lavani Demooney, the linebacker. 122 tackles, 2 sacks, 4.5 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and a fumble recovery over the last 2 seasons. He needs a career year if this is going to be a better team. Schedule-wise, Stanford misses the worst 2 teams in the conference. They don't play Arizona. They don't play Colorado. So things are going to be problematic. They can beat Colgate. Oregon State at home is a toss-up. At Notre Dame, definitely a loss. Wazoo, maybe a toss-up. BYU a loss. Most of the rest of the Pac-12 opponents are also losses. This is a four-win team at most this year. 5 teams to go. Let's talk about one of the newest acquisitions in the college football Cold War, UCLA. If you go back to my Pac-12 preview from last year, I said that Chip Kelly had found his dual-threat quarterback. He had a better-than-expected defense, and it was time to start stepping up and winning the big games. And at that, he failed miserably. He lost to Fresno State at home, lost to Arizona State at home, lost to Oregon at home. Are we sensing a trend here? The Rose Bowl was definitely not friendly confines for the Bruins. Chip Kelly was Chip Kelly. He got exactly what he wanted out of Dorian Thompson-Robinson and his offense. It was 16th ranked in the nation overall, but his up-tempo style meant his defense was on the field for sometimes 36, 37 minutes a game. They just got gassed, and they couldn't hang with teams that had similarly good offenses. To borrow from Denethor as an Eagles fan, I know Chip's uses, and they are few. So what's this team going to do this year? Probably much of the same on offense. I mean, when you have a weapon like DTR, that's really all you need a lot of the time. Zach Charbonnet is back after running for 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns. He's going to definitely help out. The defense was just awful on third downs. They allowed teams to convert 44% of their chances on third down. They've got to do a better job in the clutch, no matter how gassed they are. So enter the Murphys, Gabriel and Grayson Murphy from North Texas. Gabriel came up with 71 tackles and 12 sacks, with 17.5 tackles for loss over the last 2 years, and Grayson added 57 tackles, 11.5 sacks, and 18.5 tackles for loss. We're going to see how they do at the Power 5 level. This is definitely a step up for them. The schedule is much lighter than the fare they usually draw. Bowling Green, Alabama State, and South Alabama are their out-of-conference games, and Colorado to start conference play. This team's going to be 4-0 before a tough 2-game stretch hosting Washington and Utah. Assume they beat Washington and lose to Utah. 4 of the last 5 games are against teams that that had losing records last year. I think the target for this team has to be 9-3. There's too much turnover in this conference, too many new coaching regimes, too many question marks, plus that easy schedule to open the year. I think not improving over last year's performance would be a really big disappointment. USC. Oh boy, are you ready for some fun? Here comes Lincoln friggin' Riley and his Oklahoma pedigree to take this program that just jumped all over the new reality of college football and started pumping out NIL deals like they were T-shirts from a cannon in an auto race. They stole wide receiver Jordan Addison from Pitt. They lured running back Travis Dye away from Oregon, and they landed a whole slew of fantastic other transfers and recruits. The sky is the absolute limit for this program going forward, especially in 2024 when they go land in the Big Ten. Caleb Williams came over with Lincoln Riley to play quarterback. I mean, he was as good as you would want in any quarterback the second half of the year at Oklahoma last year. He hit 65% of his passes for 1,900 yards and 21 touchdowns with just 4 picks, and he ran for 442 yards and 6 touchdowns on top of it after he took over for Spencer Rattler. Keaton Slovis immediately saw the writing on the wall, and he took off for Pitt. As we said, he'll be throwing to Jordan Addison, who caught 100 passes last season for close to 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns at Pitt. This offense was number 1 in the Pac-12 last year, and it's only going to get better this year. So, what is this team going to do on defense? Well, USC had the 10th best defense in the Pac-12, allowed 409 yards and 32 points a game. That's why they went 4-8. The pass rush was just non-existent, and this group couldn't buy a third down stop. It's time for Nick Figueroa to take a step up. The former JUCO transfer made 46 tackles with 5.5 sacks and 12 tackles for loss with a fumble recovery in his first 3 seasons. He's got future NFL draft pick written all over him just based on his physical tools, but he's going to have to anchor this line and make it better. Schedule-wise, but for the defense, you would consider this team a lock to win the Pac-12 with everything it's got going for it. But how is the defense going to hold up against, say, Utah or UCLA, who they play on the road in Week 13, Notre Dame, who they end the season against? Hell, Fresno State is going to be a major problem for this defense. That's not a sure win either. I just don't know. Lincoln Riley was never a defensive-minded coach, and I just don't see this being the whole get the champagne on ice season that the LA media seems to want to convince you it is. I think this is an 8-4 or a 9-3 team, maybe in the mix for the title, but they just don't have all the pieces yet. We're in the home stretch, and let's talk the defending Pac-12 champs, the Utah Utes. Along with Oregon, they're going to have to be the programs that keep this conference together after USC and UCLA leave. Of course, assuming those 2 programs don't leave themselves, which they could. It's a very up in the air situation right now. The Utes continue to put together great lines, great defenses, and great running games year after year under Kyle Whittingham, and nothing about that changes now. Cameron Rising is a perfectly serviceable quarterback. He's one of those quarterbacks whose best asset is his accuracy. Not a very sexy guy, not bloated stats or anything like that, but he's reliable. He's going to be helped out by Tavion Thomas, who stepped up in the wake of the tragedy last year and notched 1,100 yards and an incredible 21 rushing touchdowns. Look for this guy in the NFL maybe as early as next year. The wide receivers are young, but they're very dangerous, led by sophomore Devon Vele, who averaged 17 yards per catch. The defense might not have been able to stop Ohio State, but it was great against just about everybody else. The run defense was amazing. The pass rush was among the best in the nation. And there's a whole lot of talent back. However, of course, Devin Lloyd is completely irreplaceable at middle linebacker. There's a reason he went in the middle of the first round. Florida transfer Mohamed Diabate is going to give it a try for Lloyd in the middle. He made 170 tackles and 5.5 sacks for the Gators in 3 seasons. The Utes have a superstar corner in Clark Phillips, and safety Cole Bishop is coming off a 55-tackle season. Schedule-wise, starting out the season at Florida and hosting San Diego State doesn't make the non-conference slate as easy it might need to be. Getting USC at home is a huge help, but having to go on the road to UCLA, Oregon, Washington State, and Arizona State, any one of those could be a loss. This is a meat grinder of a schedule. If all the breaks go their way, the Utes will certainly make the conference championship game, but they might do so as a 3-loss team. This conference really just does cannibalize itself every year. There's so much parity. Washington. Man, this team was really disappointing last year. 4-8, unsurprisingly, led to the regime change that brought in new head coach Kalen DeBoer from Fresno State, along with a new urgency to get back into the Pac-12 championship mix. DeBoer gets plenty of talent around, lots of potential all Pac-12 pieces. He definitely gets help from the transfer portal. He's got guys coming back from injury, and a schedule that misses both USC and Utah. This is not going to be a 4-8 team again. The running game is almost certainly going to be greatly improved. Wayne Tolopala is transferring in from Virginia. He ran for almost 1,200 yards with 19 touchdowns over the last 3 years. Also transferring over is Aaron Dumas, a quick back from New Mexico who ran for 658 yards and 2 scores for the Lobos last year. Dylan Morris isn't a great option at quarterback, but they really don't have a better one. The defense should be okay after finishing second in the Pac-12 overall. Number 1 in the nation in pass defense. That gets overlooked a lot. But they're not going to be as good as last year because 2 of the pieces that made that possible, Kyler Gordon and Trent McDuffie, are both off to the NFL. This team has to improve its run defense. The linebacker core is going to get some big help through the transfer portal. Cam Bright is coming in from Pitt. He made 177 tackles with 9.5 sacks and 23.5 tackles for loss in 4 years. Christopher Mole is coming in from UAB. He was a machine there, too. Look for both guys to make an impact right away. Schedule's a mixed bag. Like I said, they don't get USC or Utah, but they do have to play Oregon and Arizona State on the road. Michigan State at home is their out-of-conference game in the Power 5. UCLA on the road is going to be tough. Again, this is not going to be a 4-8 team. I think like maybe 7-5 is much more realistic starting the rebuilding process. Last but not least, Wazoo, slightly better than expected in a very weird Pac-12 last year. Had a big win over Arizona State. They benefited from Washington being terrible, got a win over them, but otherwise beat everyone they should have and lost to everyone they should have. Eric Morris is coming in from FCS powerhouse Incarnate Word as the new offensive coordinator, and he's bringing in Cameron Ward as the new quarterback. He's a great passer who threw for 4,600 yards and 47 touchdowns last year. 47 touchdowns for Incarnate Word. I know Incarnate Word is a great FCS program, but that's amazingly bloated stats. It's going to be his offense to run now that Jaden DeLara is going to Arizona. Ward is also getting one of his key targets to throw to from Incarnate Word. Robert Farrell caught 74 passes for 815 yards and 9 touchdowns last year. This defense was the best in the Pac-12 in red zone defense. It really wasn't that bad in the secondary, and it was really good on third down. What it was really, really good at, though, most of all, was turnovers. They had a Pac-12 high 29 turnovers forced. The front four has a first-team All-Pac-12 end in Ron Stone, who notched 64 tackles, 5 sacks, and 11.5 tackles for loss in a very, very good 2021. Schedule-wise, the Cougars don't have to play UCLA, which is not bad, but they do miss a Colorado team, which would have been an easy win. On the plus side, they'd get Arizona, but that means they also have to deal with USC, Utah, and Arizona State. Their out-of-conference games are at Wisconsin, probably a loss, and home against Colorado State, which is a toss-up. No reason this team can't have another winning season. I think 7-5 is a pretty good benchmark. So there you have it, the forgotten Power 5 conference where there's nothing but parity and the teams all cannibalize themselves out of a playoff spot. The usual suspects should be fighting for the championship game appearance with Oregon, Utah, and USC, determining the winner via head-to-head matchups. UCLA might be in the mix as well, and Arizona State is probably the best of the second-tier teams. We're getting to the end of the line with the Big Two, and we're going to tackle the conference on the biggest rise next in the Big Ten. I will see you next time.